Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're very pleased to see so many people with us. I'm Katrina Tarker and this is my partner,
Natalie Galea.
And welcome to our webinar. Before we go any further, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the many lands on which we're meeting today. For us, for Cultivate Sponsorship, we have been formed and continue to operate from the land of the Camaragal. And we have people joining us from many nations, in fact, and states of Australia. So we pay our respects to all the elders and First Nations people of the many lands from which we are all joined today. We are joining via this webinar platform. So one thing that's a little bit different to things you might be used to is that you will only see the panel on the screen. However, inclusion is our middle name by all accounts. And so there are a couple of ways in which we invite you to join with us today and participate along the way. You'll see that there is both a chat and a question function, and we invite you to use those. You can ask chat for questions and comments, which everybody else will be able to see. And please feel free to use question to also send comments to the moderators. So Nat and myself will be checking those periodically, and you can definitely fire off some, interesting commentary to us as well. Along the way, we're going to share with you 2 videos, and one tip for those is that there is a button that will pop up on your screen and you need to click for sound to be able to hear the audio. So what to expect today? Thank you for joining us. There's 2 real purposes for today's meeting. One is to share with you a little bit more about who Cultivate Sponsorship is, what it is that the sponsorship program is doing, and the outcomes that are being achieved. Secondly, you'll see 3 very handsome-looking individuals at the bottom of your screen there. We will be moving to a panel discussion with our panelists to really deep dive into what is going on with the state of gender diversity. We've said post-COVID, but we're really right in the middle of it, aren't we, people? So during COVID, and we've got 3 people who will be able to offer some incredibly important insights. So Libby Lyons, no doubt familiar to everybody, Director of Workplace Gender Equality Agency. Hi, Libby. Alison, Mirams, CEO of Robert's Pizzarotti. There's Alison. And Dayan, Jayasekera, Market Director, Geotechnics and Tunnels from SMEC, who's also joining us. So we will have the panel in just a moment. But what we want to do, first of all, is just share with you a little bit about Cultivate. We know that many of you may not be as familiar with us, and there's a reason for that. On the 19th of May, we were meant to have a very lovely event. We would have been at a gorgeous venue somewhere, and we would have been having sharing a drink or 2 with you to celebrate the official public launch of Cultivate Sponsorship. But we all know how that ended up. So today we are joining you online to also celebrate Cultivate Sponsorship's official public launch. And we're really thrilled to have so many people joining us. The topic, as you can tell, the focus of Cultivate is sponsorship. We will deep dive into how that is different to mentoring. That's definitely a question that we get asked very often, but it is something that goes right to the heart of what we'll be talking about today. Cultivate is a tech-based sponsorship program. We designed it exactly for these sorts of situations. It's designed to be performed, engaged in both remotely or face-to-face. So it's relatively COVID-proof. But what we're really finding is that it is so essential right now because it is absolutely targeted at giving both the women and men in your organisations the tools to have really important conversations about career progression, skills development, capability and capacity planning. And as we all know now that we're sort of starting to come up for air, that conversation has never been more important for business as we try and figure out where to from here and what are the skills that we need to have in our workforce to really be ready for the different opportunities and challenges that lie ahead. So we're very pleased to be able to be talking to you about sponsorship and in particular our Cultivate Sponsorship program today because we're finding that it's actually something that's more relevant than ever before. rather than talk for a long time about it, what we'd like to do is just a couple of short minutes. We've prepared a quick video to share with you to demonstrate and share with you how it actually operates. It features some of our friends, so we will share that with you now, and I encourage you to click that. Hi, my name's Katrina Tarker, or Kat. I'm co-founder and director of Cultivate Sponsorship. I've worked for about 20 years now in both law and financial services, and I've seen firsthand how people's careers can get fast-tracked when somebody really believes and supports them.
My name is Nat Galea, and I'm the co-founder of Cultivate Sponsorship. Through my PhD research, I found that for men, they were often forming strategic alliances, and they had access to form strategic alliances and sponsorship, which helped them progress their careers. But for women, that access was often denied. That's why Kat and we decided to form Cultivate Sponsorship. At Cultivate Sponsorship, we've had the great opportunity to work with leading international companies, many of whom are in the engineering space: ACOM, Jacobs, GHD, Consult Australia.
Companies are losing talent, that's the bottom line. It's a key risk to businesses. In actual fact, a recent PwC CEO survey confirmed that 78% of Australian CEOs believe that business growth will be impacted by a skills shortage.
We built Cultivate Sponsorship to address two things: to address women's retention and progression, but also to address leadership and company readiness in gender equality.
Cultivate is a high-impact, tech-enabled sponsorship program that helps both companies and individuals to develop, to create meaningful career progression and hence retain their people.
Cultivate works because it builds awareness of gender inequality amongst leaders in an organisation. It teaches them the individual and systemic barriers that exist within an organisation.
And in doing so, we build networks between and around your talent that will help them to stick and will help them to see the way forward in your organisation, to believe in the career progression that's available to them and believe in themselves and actually achieve those goals.
Sponsorship differs from mentoring because sponsorship is active, while mentoring is passive.
Mentoring could be a relationship that you have outside of your professional life. Often people seek a mentor who's a coach and a guide in a different industry or a different company so that you can have confidential conversations. That's a more passive relationship where you're getting advice. What you do with that advice is up to you. But sponsorship is about making those networks and pathways happen inside the organisation, and both the leader and the emerging leader have a responsibility for the activities that they undertake in that relationship. For the people we work with within the organisations, the leaders responsible for driving the program, we work closely with you so that you feel confident in how the program is going to be rolled out, what it takes for it to be successful, and we will give you the tools and the assistance to make this work. So whether you're a business leader, a diversity manager, or a person wanting to progress their career, Cultivate's for you. Okay, thank you. I hope that worked for everyone and that you got that tip about clicking sound there. We're actually very lucky to have Dayan with us today because he's in fact one of the current sponsors on a program. So he's going to be sharing some of those insights with you a little bit down the track. So if you've got any questions for what it's like to be a senior leader sponsoring other people at this point in time, fire away. And it's good to see that there's already some people using the chat line. So don't be afraid because we really do want to give everyone a chance to join us and pose your questions to the team that you've got here. So we will be showing another video at the very end as well with a little bit more information. And what Nat and I are going to do is at the end of the session, which will finish at 3 o'clock promptly, we'll stick around online for another 15, 20 minutes in case anyone's got some questions or wants to talk about anything further. But without further ado, I think it's time to give our panel the ability to share with us some of their insights. We're joined by three people who have all been in some ways touched or experienced with sponsorship with what it takes to make progress in this complex world of gender equality, and we're certainly delighted to be able to share those insights with you. So I'm going to be handing over to Nat to chair the panel, and then my job's going to be to monitor your questions and chat and pose those to the panel. So please feel free to fire away and ask us those questions. So over to you, Nat.
Thank you everybody for coming today. The panel discussion really is going to focus on two critical areas. We're going to unpack the opportunities and barriers to gender equality that have emerged due to COVID-19. The research tells us that in economic downturn, often D&I and diversity and inclusion is one of the first things to go. And yet, I must say, leading up to COVID-19, I felt, particularly in my sector that I work with often, construction, we're really gaining momentum in that area. So the discussion today will look at how can we ensure that that momentum that we've gained in D&I pre-COVID-19 won't be lost, but will be reformed and recharged. And the second part of the discussion will really examine that critical role that sponsorship plays in ensuring gender equality is practically applied within a business and an organisation to ensure diversity and inclusion success. We are delighted to have three fabulous panellists here, Libby, Lyons, Alison, Mirams, and Dayan, I'm sure I'm going to mispronounce Jayasekera. Apologies, Dayan. And to start us off, these three panellists are all great supporters, have been great supporters of both sponsorship and Cultivate, and also Katrina and myself. So thank you. So to Libby, I'm going to start you off with a bit of a scene setter. At the end of last year, during the WGEA annual results, you talked about organisations suffering a D&I fatigue. Now in 2020, businesses are dealing with COVID-19. What are you seeing and hearing in terms of how businesses are, or maybe not, prioritising D&I?
I think the first thing I need to say is that now is the most important time in the 5 years that I've been director of the agency to ensure that we remain focused on diversity and inclusion in general and gender equality in particular. And the reason for that is that, you know, almost on a monthly basis, we are seeing more and more people unemployed. And as we move to a recovery phase, an economic recovery phase, it is absolutely vital that women have the same opportunity to re-engage in the workforce as men. And in order to do that, we need employers to positively take active steps to ensure that the policies and strategies that they have in place are actually being driven by their workforce, but their management teams in particular. So you're quite right, Matt. At the end of last year, when we released the data for last year, I was concerned that we were seeing some stagnation in terms of the numbers that were coming in around things like the percentage of CEOs. So the percentage of CEOs in our data set has remained stagnant at between 15 and 17%. That's female CEOs. Now, that, to be frank, that's pathetic. We've also seen stagnation around the percentage of female directors, company board directors and things. Again, that's remained static at around 25 or 26%. It hasn't changed in 7 years. Now, we can't allow this to continue because we now have hard evidence that if you increase the percentage of women on your boards, if you increase the percentage of women in senior leadership teams, profitability, productivity improves. You will outdo your competitors. So it's now more important than ever to ensure that we have everything in place that does not discriminate against gender, colour, ethnicity, any of those factors, that we are taking people, that we are not excluding people, that we are opening up our workforces to the best possible candidates. So yes, we did see some stagnation. We did see a little bit of fatigue. But what I am seeing now is that through the evidence that we keep seeing come through, the research that we keep seeing come through, I am optimistic that employers are recognising that it is really important, because I think every employer, whether they're female or male, have brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, children who are struggling, who have lost their job, who are underemployed, and they recognise that this is something that we have to focus on for all Australians, not just men. So I'm optimistic. I think it's incumbent on every one of us to ensure that we make sure that this topic of diversity and inclusion and gender equality is continually communicated through all media channels. We've just got to keep our foot on the pedal and keep talking to the advantages that it will bring your organisation and make you more competitive and profitable.
I'm going to shift now to Alison. You're a CEO of a construction company, and I have to say, with COVID, when it emerged in March and April, I mean, it really felt like our sector was going to fall off a cliff, and there was great anxiety in relation to what was to happen next. As a business leader, how do you deal with business uncertainty while remaining committed to gender equality?
Nat, it's a really interesting question, and I think Libby just hit the nail on the head. You are more successful if you have gender equality in your business. So we're not talking about in a good time, do you want to go and sponsor a footy team, and in a bad time you cut it. We're talking about a business imperative. So when you're going into business uncertainty, you stick to the things that you know are good for your business, and we know gender is good for your business. What I have seen out of COVID is I actually think it's a really exciting opportunity for us. Every cloud has a silver lining, and what I see in COVID is that we put the construction industry into the quickest, fastest, biggest experiment we could have on flexible working. We asked people to be at home and still build construction sites remotely. Was it hard? Yes. Did it work? Yes. Resounding yes. So now all the dinosaurs in the industry that once said you couldn't work flexibly, you couldn't work remotely, well, guess what? You can. The other thing that I've seen is, and I posted on it on LinkedIn last week, for the first time ever, a man has felt what it's like for an expectant mother to be going off work to have a baby. That isolation, that forced into your home, your life stopped, everyone else's life continued, and that lonely isolation feeling. So that when women come back from maternity leave and you take their job away, you might actually now have a different view on that, because you now realise how important that job is to the returning worker. So I actually hope that this period of uncertainty has actually proven that what men say women want in terms of flex and being able to work remotely, it's not a women's issue, it's a people issue. And I really hope this period has shown everyone, when you do diversity, you actually get a better result for people, not for men, not for women, for everyone. And I think that's a really exciting part of what we're in at the moment.
One of the things that we find with Cultivate and the way it's been designed is that it does focus on people across your business. So it's focusing on your senior leaders and getting them ready and fit for sponsorship, but also people, and most notably women, who I guess in my research told me they were in the lost lands of their careers, the sort of mid-level women. Libby, there's much confusion though. You know, we talk about sponsorship. Most people think we're talking about sponsoring a football team, to Alison's point. What is the difference between sponsorship and mentoring?
Well, I think your video summed it up beautifully. I think mentoring is a passive thing, and it's something that generally tends to happen one-on-one, and you're seeking advice and you're seeking counsel and you're seeking somebody else's experience to help you manage your way through the labyrinth that is often your career. I think the thing about sponsorship, it is very active. It is the role of the sponsor is so important, because that sponsor becomes the advocate for the sponsee. They become the promoter of the skills, the experience, the potential of that person, that sponsee, in their current workplace. And that's really, really important, because we often forget that skills are actually very transferable, that we don't have to stay in the same job or the same area of a business in order to progress. And in fact, the skills that I may have as an HR professional or as a legal professional, those skills are readily transferable into an operational part of the business as well, because so much of the management and the logistics and all of those things that we manage on a regular basis are needed in an operational sense as well. So I think that the thing about sponsorship is that that sponsor becomes your advocate. That sponsor becomes that person that talks you up, that puts you forward, that puts an idea in management's head that actually you're not just that HR person, or you're not just that corporate affairs person, that you have potential, that you have skills. And I think that's the difference. So it's that active participation in promoting somebody through a business and helping them move up that career ladder that is very, very different to mentoring, which tends to be more an advice type relationship between two people. So for me, that's the difference between mentoring and sponsoring. And I've seen it work. I've seen both work, but I've particularly seen sponsorship work. Before it even became sponsorship, it was that willingness and that the wonderful giving that somebody is prepared to do on your behalf to help, because they recognise in you the ability to move forward.
Great. Libby, I'm really interested. And what's your view? Is it more important in male-dominated industries or cross-industries, given the nature of the relationship you just described?
So from what I have observed, sponsorship is far more active in male-dominated industries. That, men have embraced the fact that there are wonderful women that are really not getting the opportunity and the chance that they should to progress their careers. And so they have actively embraced sponsorship, whether it be in a formal or informal sense, they have done that. But you know what? This is a fabulous opportunity for female-dominated industries, because here we are, midway through a pandemic, and we are seeing people lose their jobs. And this is a wonderful opportunity to look at how we engage more men to embrace careers, sustainable and really rewarding careers in education and training and healthcare and social assistance. And they are two of the industries that are growth industries. So this would be a wonderful opportunity, not just to attract men in, but also to see women sponsoring other women. Because again, if we look at those industries, we see too many men, even though men are they're not dominant in those industries. There are lots of men in management. So now this is an opportunity for female-dominated industries for women to actually sponsor other women. How about that for a change?
So that's a great point, Libby. And I guess from a personal perspective, in my own research, I found that it was very prevalent that men were sponsoring other men, albeit informally. But one of the things that I found as well was that the few women who sort of broke through into that rare air in those sort of leadership roles, they told stories of sponsorship. And I guess, Alison, to your career, have you experienced sponsorship in your career progression into the role of CEO?
Nat, my entire career was built by two sponsors. So my first job when I was a cadet, the boss of the, I was a quantity surveyor, and the boss of the quantity surveying section took me under his wing, and whatever meeting he went to, he took me to, any site inspection he took me to, and I basically shadowed him for 3 years. And when I got into multiplex, there was a wonderful man named Jim McGreevy, and Jim was a construction manager and I was a contracts administrator when I started. And for some reason, Jim took me under his wing and he saw something in me. And every time Jim got promoted, he pulled me with him. And I have never asked for a promotion in my career. I turned one down at one stage and I said to him, I'm having too much fun on site. I don't want to go to head office yet. He let me stay on site, and a year later he came back and he said to me, okay, you've got to move now. And I didn't know whether to move or not. And after 3 meetings, he said, you have to make a decision. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to trust you because you've never done anything bad by me. And 6 months later, I was promoted to being a director of the business. I was the only female director and I was 32. And Jim built my career. He pulled me through. He pushed me to achieve. He pushed me for promotions. I cannot say enough amazing things about sponsorship because I am an absolute beneficiary of it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, I also think too that there's interesting sponsorship relationships, and we often focus on the sponsee, and we fail to sort of acknowledge what benefit sponsorship has for the sponsor, which brings me to you, Dayan. You're currently a sponsor on the Cultivate program. How are you finding it?
We've just got to unmute you first. Oh, yeah, there we go.
Like a little trick there. I guess as a sponsor, well, you get to kind of, it's an amazing program to start with, purely because normally when you think sponsor, you think of sponsee and sponsor. But the benefit the program has is you do it with, say, in our instance, 12 other people. So as a cohort, whether it's leaders in the business or sponsees, you've got a good mix of people. So what it does for us is it gives us a great opportunity. We're in a consulting business, so it's all about people. That's what our clients want, and the intellect and IP and the knowledge they have. So for us, it's very much about going through this program. It's not just about the sponsee. The sponsor gets exposed to things that you go, hang on, I didn't really appreciate that element of what they're doing and what other things they do in their day-to-day life. So it's been really good in terms of, while it's been during COVID, we've been able to still run through with the program, because times like this, you can only control the stuff you can influence and control, and how you develop your people is something that you can control. So regardless of what's happening on the outside world, getting ready for what it looks like post-COVID and the capability and how we share that capability is really important. So that's an area where I think previously I was lucky to have a few good mentors and people that probably, without calling it sponsorship, did do that. And I bet you, Nat, in your research, you'd call that sponsorship. So been really lucky to get to where I have in my career, and being able to give that back to so many team members in a professional services business, and share those insights that you gain about the sponsees with your peers is very, very powerful. And that's probably the big change that I've seen in the first part of this program.
And what have you learnt particularly as a sponsor?
I've learned to listen a lot more, and perhaps one of the key things is, as a business, it's quite easy, like human nature, such that we can form an opinion very quickly when you first interact with someone. So one of the key things that I've picked up and been able to share with some of the colleagues in the team is that sometimes we can have the wrong perception of an individual purely based on it could be a report you've read, a professional interaction you've had with a client, or one snapshot might help you form a view. So when you spend some time and some deeper time understanding an individual, suddenly you realize, hang on, perhaps that perception's not right, and there could be cultural backgrounds and other things that help, or a certain life stage that make you form that view. So being able to break some of those perceptions and misconceptions informally in that type of cohort is very valuable also. So just come off a couple of days of sitting in an executive meeting, and one of the things that this program did was it made us say, okay, well, how about inviting some of these sponsees to gain a little bit of an insight over a day and a half of what it is that actually happens and what we're talking about. And that's been really valuable, and the contributions have been amazing. So in terms of diversity, again, getting that perspective, whether it's on things like, okay, do we have more flexible work arrangements? What are those things? It makes when you make a decision, it's more informed and a lot more sound in terms of what you're doing, because you get lots of different perspectives.
I like your point about the perception, because one thing we heard with one other organisation was the sponsors pointed out that they had known some of the candidates as graduates but hadn't kept in touch. So what was the big revelation to them was they still thought of these sponsees as sort of semi-juniors in, a couple of years in, but in fact, they were extremely talented, experienced females with 10 plus years, and they got the shock of their life realising how quickly time had passed. So it's sort of updating that perception as well to that person's current capabilities, because you might be hanging on to something they did 5 years ago and it's really not that accurate anymore.
So Libby,
across the board.
Yeah,
you found it across the board. Yeah. So I guess one of the things that we find when we tackle the topic of sponsorship with companies is there's this uncomfortableness around being transparent about offering a leadership or sponsoring program specifically to women. Why do you think it's still necessary to have programs that are focused on retaining and progressing women?
Well, I'll go back to the figure I used before. Just 17% of CEOs in our data set are women. We're in 2020, pandemic or no pandemic, 17% of our CEOs are women. That's a disgrace. And in order to get more women into those CEO roles, we need more transparency. We need more women to be given the opportunity at operational roles. That women are not just good at HR and law and corporate affairs and all those sorts of soft type skills. They actually can run a business. Look at Alison, just absolutely kicking goals everywhere she goes. So women are actually very good at running businesses, but they're not given the chance. And they're not given the chance because they often don't have the operational experience. And we know that a lot of CEOs, that when people, boards and whatever, are looking to appoint CEOs, they want women, or they want people that have got operational experience. And that's not happening for women. And this is where a sponsorship program is absolutely critical. That in those lovely, quiet little boys' chats that often have those purple circles that go on in different organisations when we're talking about who next we're going to promote and who we're going to give an opportunity to, that's where that sponsor, that role of the sponsor absolutely comes to the fore, because that's where that person can say, have you considered Alison? That's what Jim did for Alison time and time and time again. This woman's got what it takes. And that's why we need sponsorship, particularly for women. We need it so that we can get women with the 360-degree experience that they need in order to become CEOs. And then from there on, we will see more women become board directors as well. So it's critical. It's the only way we're going to see gender balance at CEO level before the next 80 years, which on current figures, that's what it's going to say, that, it's 80 years before we get gender balance at CEO level. Look, I simply have not got that much time left, so sponsorship is absolutely vital.
You and me both. I don't have that time left either. So there's a benefit. Only a smidgen. There's a benefit there for improving, retaining and progressing women. But what about for the organisation? Dayan, I mean, you're in the thick of it. What organisational benefits can you see SMEC has gained from being part of the Cultivate sponsorship program so far?
I think one of the key things is James, our CEO, he's part of the Males Champions of Change. So I think while we got the Virginia citation and all the other things that we do, it gives it a bit of consistency and a structure to look at it in a slightly formal way. Sometimes you can talk about things and it doesn't really happen, but when you think about a program like this and you invest in it and you have checkpoints where you say, okay, well, how are we going? There's a middle point. How's it working for everyone? I think it keeps everyone accountable to each other. So one thing is you undertake the program and work through it and get to know people better. And then the important part is how we act and behave afterwards in terms of keeping that fresh in your mind, keeping those connection points, and making sure you do continue to recommend, suggest, and put forward the people that you've been dealing with and interacting with. Because I think that having that currency, because we all go through life stages as well, you know, we might have other things that come up which we need to deal with, and then suddenly it goes on the back burner and too busy to worry about certain things. But something like this gives it structure and a level of formality. And I think as a team, the 12 of us that go through this, the fact that we can talk about some of the participants and sponsees and their strengths and skill sets where they can absolutely add a lot of value to teams and how we do things is really powerful. So I think it's helped us lift our game.
And the thematic for today's webinar is really analysing, you know, the gender equality in our behaviours and mindsets in the midst of COVID. SMEC made the very positive decision to commence notwithstanding COVID and is running the program now. How do you think that the fact that you're focusing on sponsorship at this time is interacting with the challenges you're facing?
Well, compared to what some of our colleagues are dealing with in Victoria with another lockdown and stuff like that, it's absolutely nothing. But the most fun part was you try doing a day in the life of someone remotely. It gets a little bit tricky and fun. You get to go through schedules and go, okay, well, which parts do you want to participate in and which ones don't you? So I think for us it was, hey, we're committed to this thing. Let's get on, let's see the benefits and let's work through it. So we've missed a couple of awesome opportunities to do a few things face-to-face. Again, forming those bonds, not just the sponsor-sponsee, but as a cohort. I think that's the little element that we've missed out on, that perhaps next year we won't, because we'll be out of this thing. And I think that other than trying to deal with not being able to do things face-to-face, everything else has been good. It's been a great connection point because, again, it's not a line manager type relationship. So it's being able to talk about what's happening. You know, it's very authentic, whether it's my kids running around in the background or my sponsees, you know, it's real. So just like it is with us, with our clients and colleagues, it's a very rich relationship. And I think as humans, we morph to deal with that and adapt to it. So day in the life is the trickiest one. But other than that, I think it's great and it'll go well.
It's interesting you mentioned our fellow colleagues and friends in Victoria. We've got another organisation who have got many people in Victoria on the program, and when we check in with them, the people in lockdown are actually sharing that they're really appreciating those extra opportunities to be connected, as you said, outside of just their team. So it gives them yet another portal into the organisation, and they're having their daily check-ins with their line managers and their regular teammates, but this is giving them yet another set of eyes and ears, and one where they can vent a little bit differently, like what does this mean to me in my career, do a little bit more of that exploration that Libby spoke about. So it's fascinating to see how people are utilising it to build different relationships at this point in time.
Absolutely. And Dayan, I was just going to ask, as a working dad, in COVID, and we are, the theme of today is really looking at gender equality in and post-COVID. What changes in mindset or behaviours have you seen for both men and women within your work environment as a result of COVID in terms of the way we work, and which ones do you think are going to stick?
I think walking in someone else's shoes is one that's going to stick in a traditional engineering organisation where you might go, oh, you're not here. That means something's not happening. So I think one of the big things is being able to do things from home, to be able to go and sometimes pick up the kids after school and be able to, obviously not travelling as much on planes is a great thing. The fact that you can do things remotely, I think some of those things are going to stick because not only does it give you more time in the day, you are more productive and you'll have more leisure time. So you could have colleagues that commute for an hour and a half each way every day, and having a little bit of flexibility to say, oh, well, you don't have to be there all the time. There are going to be times when you can actually do some of those things remotely. So what COVID's done is probably forced us to make sure that our systems and processes are a little bit more robust, and that we can do those things. And for some of us who are a little bit older or perhaps a product of their old environment, I have seen a few different things. So I heard someone today say,
Dayan, can I ask Dayan whether you actually nicked out to put the washing on occasionally, or
absolutely. And got caught.
I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, definitely. And washing goes on. So we have 3 kids, my lovely wife and I, and she's works full time. So it gives you a very good appreciation. And I think in our family unit, not as much interstate travel has made things a lot richer and better. So I think we all work out ways of how to do things, and some of the traditional norms have moved aside to say you don't have to be there in person to be able to do that. So it gives you more time with your family, your peers, your clients. I think it's we're going to be a little bit smarter, and this has forced us to look at doing things a little bit differently. So along with some of our clients, I think we might start to see less of a requirement for office space in CBDs. Perhaps as an area that might change.
Yeah. And Alison, what about in your area? What have you seen that you think has changed, and what might stick as a result of COVID-19?
On that, the flexibility is enormous, and having project engineers working from home and turning on FaceTime and being able to do that. What I've seen is we surveyed our staff, and 32% of our staff said that they want to continue to have flexible working. What I've seen is a lot of dads saying, I had dinner with my family last night. That was really nice. And now I know I can leave work. I can have dinner with my family. If I need to log on, I can. Yesterday, I had a break in my day between 3 and 4 o'clock. I ducked home. I picked up my son from school and I jumped on a Zoom at 4 till 5, and I did that from home. I'm still working 1 day a week from home. The other 4 days I've come back into the office. I think it's no longer seen as a women's issue and an issue for mums and parents. It's just a people issue, which I think is really, really exciting.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier you did a blog recently on LinkedIn, and you mentioned the similarities between COVID and working in physical isolation to being a new mother. What we found really interesting is a few of our clients are using sponsorship as a way to really reconnect, or stay connected, I should say. It'd be terrible if they were disconnected, but stay connected with their parents on parental leave. I mean, you've had this experience of taking a break for parental leave and navigating quite senior positions, may I say, very senior indeed. So I guess how do you think sponsorship and a program like Cultivate could have helped re-ramp up your career on entry back after parental leave?
Oh, look, my return from parental leave was very bad. I came back, I had 3 or 4 meetings, and my boss said to me, we don't want to put you back in your old position because the guy doing your job might resign. And I said to him, that's called illegal. And I had bled 16 years. I bled black and white for that organisation. And to have that role taken away from me was very traumatic, and it took me quite a few years to actually rationalise it in my brain. So if I had someone, and at that point in time, it's important to point out my sponsor had left the organisation 2 years prior to my mat leave. To have someone and to keep connected at a really senior level, and to be knowing I'm coming back into this position. Are we ready? On day one, no one spoke to me. No one spoke to me for 3 weeks. It was just assumed that I'd stayed in touch and I knew what was going on. My entire life changed. The only thing that was consistent was my job. And that's why I really hope that men get that feeling of isolation, and every single thing as a mum changes except your job. And in many respects, that is your sanctuary. When Matt was really little, and I've got the perfect child, when he was little, I'd skip out the house to go to work. It was great. I could have a cup of tea in peace. So to have the sponsorship program, I think, is really important. And it was one of the things that we committed to when we set up the business, was to have return to work coaching for mums coming back to work. And 3 years ago, your program didn't exist. So I couldn't recommend it more highly, because for some reason, women miss out on a pay rise, on a bonus through that maternity period. But if you think of the increase in a woman's skill level when she's had a year at home, go and Google a management course at AGSM. You learn to deal with conflict. You learn to deal with competing priorities. You learn to manage through a crisis. All of that is applicable to the skills you learn when you are dealing with a newborn child. And if you've ever negotiated with a 2-year-old, you understand it. They are no different to the skills you learn in business. So in many respects, on maternity leave, you have done a management course free of charge to your organisation. You actually come back with a lot more skills than you left. I'm a better manager being a mum. I have more empathy. I have more understanding. I get that things need to happen outside the home. I didn't appreciate that until I had a child. So your sponsorship program will actually set women up for success. And what it then removes is whether the line manager is interested or not, because you've got a sponsor who's not the line manager, who's over and above to make sure that that person will not miss out returning to work. I think it's amazing what you're doing.
Thanks, Alison. It's fascinating. We've got one client that has for 2 years running now actually put their women offered, I won't say put because it's voluntary, but offered their women on mat leave or within sort of a couple of months of returning to go on the program, and they're completing it in those sort of couple of months before coming and going in. And initially we had some resistance from some of the women who said, shouldn't somebody who's at work get this spot? They deserve it more. They're working hard. And we went, no, you deserve it and you've got it. And they found it really invaluable in crossing that sort of gap that can open up in your perception of what it's going to be like to return.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is too, because I'll always return to the research, but in my research, I found that in one company that I studied, 50% of people who went on parental leave, and it was the same for men as well as women, if they were primary carers, they left the company, they were lost to the company. And so, I know Libby always also points out that it's very hard, particularly for men who go on parental leave as primary carers. It's twice they're discriminated against far more than women who take on that initial primary carer role. So I think that having that connection to the organisation whilst people are on primary care is so critical. Libby, did you want to add anything?
I think that's why we need to get rid of these labels about primary and secondary carers. I say time and time again, we are all just parents. And it doesn't matter what sort of relationship you're in. If you have children, you are a parent. And as employers, we need to recognise that many of our employees are parents, and we all have a responsibility to parent our children. So we need to forget these labels. And, you know, government's the first that needs to forget the labels of primary and secondary carer. And we need to move forward and recognise us all as parents and recognise the fact that children need their parents, no matter what gender they are, they need their parents in their lives.
Yeah, I agree. And just a shout out to the organisations out there who are changing their policies to eliminate the primary and secondary carer. Get loud and tell us all about it, because the more you do, the more normal it becomes for the rest of the companies, and they won't want to be left behind. They'll just want to have parents, not primary and secondary parents.
Right. And there are many of them out there that are doing that. And the other thing that I would say is that for a lot of these organisations, they're also very generous in sharing their policies with other organisations, because they recognise how important it is. And there's no point in reinventing the wheel. If you're an organisation and you want to bring in a parental leave for all parents, then don't rewrite the policy from scratch. Go out there and ask others if you can have a look at theirs, and then adjust it to suit your workplace. So these leading organisations that are leading the way in terms of parental leave, that are leading the way in terms of flexible work, and all of these other issues that we know help drive gender equality and diversity and inclusion, they are by nature very generous organisations.
We've got about 9 to 10 minutes, and I just want to share some questions with you that are coming through. Now, we've got a lot of people online still, so don't miss this opportunity to ask questions to these wonderful speakers. So, Alison, you're in the hot seat. We've got one specifically for you. As a woman in construction currently pursuing a PhD, wanting to be a part of the industry post-PhD, what would your advice be? Does the industry have roles for advanced degree holders? You'd have a view on this too, Nat, I'd suspect.
I was going to say, there's your perfect role model in Natalie.
That's what I prepared earlier.
Yeah, look, I think what Natalie's doing amazingly with us at the moment, and this is a beautiful example of it, we have a site where we have the construction program is 5 days a week, and we are trialling it to try and combat the mental health and wellbeing issues that exist in the industry, the high divorce rates, high suicide rates, that sort of thing. Natalie is studying it for us, and Natalie had a piece of research for her PhD, and then went out and got a whole lot of findings out of what the industry was like. We're now trialling a 5-day working week on Concord Hospital, and for 2 years Natalie is studying the construction workers, but also really importantly studying 5 or 8 partners of the construction workers to see if it's actually having an impact on home life. And then Natalie will be able to compare that piece of research to her prior piece of research. And when I talk to clients about it and I say it's been studied by a PhD, a postdoctorate, they're like, oh my God, that's amazing. I can't wait to hear about it. You know, I was only talking to the Deputy Prime Minister's office last week, and he said, I can't wait to read that research. So there's a great example of what a PhD student can do in this industry.
And I didn't write that question, Gina DeGeorge.
Now, just switching industries, one of the wonderful things about today is that we have people from all sorts of areas. So we have financial services, law firms online, obviously construction and engineering. We have another one from someone who says, I'm from a financial services organisation who has spent many years focusing on this stuff but hasn't gotten very far. Could sponsorship be the thing that makes a difference? Libby, do you get to have a bird's eye view across Australian organisations? Do you think financial services is an area that could help its D&I fatigue get a kick along with some sponsorship?
Yeah, look, interestingly, financial services is one of our few industries that's actually gender balanced. But unfortunately, again, most of the people in senior management are men. So women aren't getting that leg up into higher management roles that they should be getting. So sponsorship is absolutely a wonderful way to give women the help and support that they need to move up that career ladder. I think I don't like to beat financial services around the head too much, and the reason for that is that they are trying very, very hard, and they've always taken the wooden spoon for having the highest gender pay gap of all industries. But you know, the progress that we have seen made in reducing their gender pay gap over the 7 years that we've been reporting data has been exceptional. So they are working really, really hard. But I think that if the financial services industry as a whole embraced sponsorship and embraced the need for sponsorship and programs such as Cultivate to ensure that they saw more women in management, then that would be absolutely fantastic. And may I draw your attention to some research that we published and that we launched just a month or so ago with Bankwest Curtin Economics Centre. Now, Bankwest Curtin Economics Centre took our data set and they looked at our data set for AS-listed companies, and they found for the first time, we believe, in the world, a causal link between having more women on boards and more women in management and improved productivity and profitability. So, for instance, I can tell you that if you have an increase of 10 percentage points or more in female representation on boards of ASX-listed companies, that has led to a 4.9% increase in company market value, which equates roughly to $78.5 million. Now, if that's not the evidence that you need to start getting more women, and that's just one of the findings, to start getting more women onto your boards or more women into leadership positions, then you shouldn't be in your job, because as a leader, as a board director, and as an executive, you have a fiduciary duty to your shareholders and your owners. And if you are not across this information, if you are not across this evidence, then get across it and put your action plan in place, because otherwise you are neglecting your duty as an executive and a director.
Yeah.
I think we possibly couldn't end up on a more powerful call to action if we wrote that one ourselves. I'm just conscious of time, and I know people do have many back-to-back Zoom meetings these days, so we will respect that time and let people get off on time. Nat and I, as we said, will stay online. We've booked this Zoom call to stay on for another 15 minutes. If anybody wants to continue to chat and ask questions, we will be here. I'm sure that everybody who made this 1 hour in their diary will have found it one of the most useful and engaging and insightful 1 hours they've had in a very long time. Libby and I were having a chat about the variable quality of calls that you can hop onto these days. I heard that there's definitely an increase in people's time that they've got back, but we're working smarter, we're working harder, but we're doing things differently. And I think there's a bit of optimism that those things might be here to stay, that this could actually be the thing that kicks out some of the mindsets that dinosaurs were holding on to. One of you guys used the dinosaur word, not me. And I think that if we could take this on board as both a people issue and a parent issue, and remove some of those other gendered and stereotyping labels, there's a common humanity in all of that. I thank you also, speakers, for sharing with us your very personal insights on the impact that sponsorship has had along the way on your own journeys, and also, Libby, that you've observed in seeing companies who are doing it well and doing what it takes to get that payback that you spoke of. Of course, thank you very much to our participants for joining us. This is potentially much more engaging than an hour of a live event would have been. We got to be with you face to face. We will have a live event one day when that's possible, because I think everyone's ready to celebrate and have some of those in-person connections that Dayan spoke about. I definitely think groups of people still enjoy being together, but we've really enjoyed being together with everybody here today. And for the last few minutes as you're logging out, we'll just share with you a quick 45-second, if you have 45 seconds left, video of how the Cultivate program actually works, so you can see for yourself why it's got so much impact. Stay tuned for the next webinar. We will hold one in a couple of weeks' time. And in the meantime, don't forget to press on the click for sound button as you watch this video. And thank you very much.
When we built Cultivate, we put the user at the centre of our attention. We wanted to offer something that's really enjoyable and easy to use, something that our participants will enjoy doing and they can do on the run. You can even do it in bite-sized chunks while you're waiting for a client meeting or picking up the kids from school. Over 7 months, Cultivate takes participants on a journey where they first get to know each other, reflect on their aspirations and their leadership legacy. They get to build a better perspective of each other and the business, and also then to agree a plan of advancement and to execute it. The company is intensively supported throughout the process, starting with an onboarding workshop. Cultivate is for all levels of the organisation, from junior people who are being supported to get clarity on their next step, right through to senior leaders being developed to support organisational readiness in gender diversity. From a sponsor perspective, they get the opportunity to develop as leaders within an inclusion focus and see the extensive talent within their organisation. On the other side, it's incredible to see how the program nurtures women by giving them career development opportunities, clarity and access to leadership support within the organisation, ensuring that they feel valued by the company. We've worked with engineering and construction firms and are starting to work across the broader professional services industry. Cultivate is grounded in Australian research, but it's globally valid and can be used by people all around the world.